Hey, welcome, Frags of Beer family. My name is Zamot. I'm your host. Also known as Trevor on social media. You can find links to all of my stuff in the video description below, including ways to keep the content ad-free as possible, at least until we get to 1,000 subscribers and have to monetize, because apparently YouTube is going to do it for us anyway. So get us to 1,000 so we can start taking some of that ad revenue from YouTube and putting it at least to buying new material, new hardware, whatnot. Also subscribe to the channel. That's the biggest way you can support me, is just click that red button and subscribe. So today on Indie Spotlight, I am talking to Kassidy Blond from Pointman Comics, and like he posted in the chat, definitely check out his link, which I will put in the video description below, on how to find his work, how to find his books, how to support him, how to get all that good stuff. So you'll be able to find that after the stream. Just click the link, it'll take you right to his work. So, tell us a little bit about yourself and Pointman Comics.
Well, I'm sort of like, I'm sort of kind of like a new writer in a way. I mean, most people don't even know my stuff because most times it's like you throw the stuff out there. Most people will either check it out or they won't.
Mm-hmm.
I'm mostly just a factory worker. I work about like probably 40 hours a week, and I usually came up with my ideas just on off chance when I'm like working on something. It's a routine that's just, just gets really boring. And so it's like, I get my thoughts to myself and work up these short stories. The thing is, like, what comes down to is that I wasn't sure which genre I'm really good at, so I just kept on going with multiple genres. Started out with 4 stories, then I had to split them up into 2 issues, just to get my work put out there. Due to legal reasons. Like trademark is like you have to have 2 printed issues with the trademark logo on it, which is basically Pointman Comics.
Okay.
And basically just started out with the first short story I ever wrote was Town Without Death. It was basically a horror story, basically dealing with what would happen if you had killed someone, but then of course you've awoken an eldritch horror that's trying to track you down and kill you.
Okay.
Of course, that one wasn't the first story being presented in issue 1. That one gets put into issue 2.
Okay.
Along with the third story I wrote, which was basically called Leather Punch. Leather Punch basically deals with 2 ne'er-do-wells who basically go around doing odd jobs in after the world ends, stuff like that. You get basically mutants and robots and all this other stuff or whatever. But basically it's like they're just doing an odd job and getting it done.
Sure.
But then of course there's always like danger around the corner. It's kind of like Mad Max type deal.
Okay.
The third story I wrote was Hell is Full, which is basically stars this main character, Abe Smoke, who his job is to basically locate a missing demon singer by one of her admirers.
Okay.
The big problem with that is I wanted to mix in a world that was not done yet. So I basically started out with, what if hell became full and basically the entire world was overtaken by demons? Like basically it burst open, killed all the human race, and the demons then took up being human.
Okay.
There's like going to be more lore to it once I start getting those scripts taken care of. But then of course it's like you got to balance out marketing and
right,
all that good stuff.
all
it's
that
like
fun indie stuff that nobody tells you about until you get into it, right?
oh yeah, definitely. Most people are just like, oh, is this Marvel? Is this DC? Is this
Yeah.
this that? Oh, look, let's complain about this thing, yada yada. And it's like, well,
Yeah.
let's talk about the good stories, okay? Let's
Right.
talk about, because there are good stories out there. People tend to focus more on those because it's like those get the most attention,
Right.
you
For
know.
sure.
So the fourth, yeah.
Go ahead. Well, I was going to say, I'm with you with, I worked retail for a lot of years and I spend a lot of time stocking shelves and thinking about stories. So I absolutely feel you when you talk about the boring job giving you a lot of time to put your brain to other things. And sometimes you need an outlet for those things. I could relate to that a lot for sure. So with Pointman Comics, like you said, it's interesting that a lot of indie comic creators, I guess, don't jump right into trying to trademark or brand their own imprint. That's interesting that you did it that way. And is there a meaning behind Pointman, or is that something that you just picked, or what's behind that?
Well, it's basically just an easily recognizable name. Once, basically, it's to be just the name of the anthology series or be the name of the comic series, just so that it's all under one,
Sure.
under one umbrella and stuff like that, or whatever you want to call it. But
Okay.
it's like association. Like basically, I was just looking at, like Action Comics. You know,
Mm-hmm.
the Superman's, the Antenna, all those other series came out of it. Then there's Amazing
Right.
Fantasy. So I just thought, okay, pick out some of those, people will remember and stuff.
Gotcha. Yeah,
You
no,
know,
I
very
understood. Yeah, I like that. So that you're, so I was curious about that when I first looked at the issue. I wasn't sure because I'm looking at indie comics. You just never know if you're just going to get just one continuous story that the writer wanted to write, or in your case, obviously looking at the first issue, you've got two stories packed in there, and then you've got at the end you've got some sketches and some kind of behind the scenes
hmm
stuff, which, like we talked about before the show, was kind of reminiscent of sort of a lighter version of heavy metal, because obviously heavy metal or some of those amazing fantasy or some of those older books would put out multiple stories. Obviously, they'd bring in like 5 or 6 or 7 writers and artists and put together one big issue, where you're doing a lot of the writing and from what I could tell, the lettering yourself.
Yep.
So obviously you can't do it. It would take you longer to do one issue if you were to do that many stories. Um, is that was that the way you, or is that the way you always want to go, or are you looking at maybe expanding into full issue stories, longer runs, or multiple issue stories? Are you going to keep it to these nice, tight, concise stories and multiple stories per issue, I guess? What are you thinking?
Well, I was thinking about doing a mix because I do have this one. I can display it right now. Let me just share a screen after I
Sure,
find the.
please.
Well, like my fourth story was Gorilla Galaxy, which that's the one that's the major draw for most of
Mm-hmm.
my people like my comics. Most of them just don't seem to understand that when I was promoting those or whatever, I was also promoting having a separate all these other stories I had. So
Right.
it's like that's the one that's the biggest draw for people.
Sure.
The big problem with some people is that they're just focused on that and like I post other artwork.
Right, yeah.
You
I think
know.
it's eye-catching, especially, I mean, that's what catches my eye when I'm scrolling through Twitter is definitely Gorilla Galaxy has got some great art, and it's got some unique art too, which I think is what catches the eye. Your protagonist is very unique, and then the weasel or the ferret, bad guys, that's sort of like, you're like, what's going on here? Because you see that art and it's very eye-catching. So I think that's what's hooking your viewers and your readers is how unique that imagery is for the most part. And I guess that's what's tough, because when for writers, it's hard to hook somebody in such a visual format like Twitter. Like you might be able to post a flash fiction of a few words, but most people aren't going to look at that. But when you put a picture up there that everybody's like, "Ooh, this is cool," but we don't draw, we write, and it makes it kind of a challenge sometimes, I think.
Are you able to see the screen that I'm showing?
I am not. let me see. So, viewers, this is only my second time using StreamYard, so let me see if we can figure this out. I see it. I'm going to add it to the stream. There we go.
Right.
Okay. Yep.
So this is for the 48-page one. It'll probably be for issue 4.
Okay.
Because it's still being colored right now. It's got about 15 pages left.
Nice.
The thing I wanted to do with the one short story, put that one in the front because it's more visual. Because the reason for it is because the artist was very professional, didn't constantly give me, I'll get it done by next Tuesday, I'll get it done by next Friday. Oh, I prefer drawing them this way. I prefer, oh, can you give me a rewrite on the script? Can you do this? Yada, yada, yada. And it's like, that isn't professional. You always need to go by the script. You do not make changes unless you're the one paying for it. You should communicate. You should give out trust to know that you can get the job done.
Yeah.
Some people like to fool you into the whole, oh, I can get this done. I can get this done. Oh, yeah, can you give me money in advance so I can pay my rent? Blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, don't do that. Do not fall for that. Then you walk into a perfectionist lifestyle, and they're like, oh, yeah, if one line is bad, I will erase the entire page and never show you. And it's like, that is not how that works. You show me the page, and I will be the one that'll be the decider on that.
Right, yeah.
What this artist did, this is the cover artist, Vince Rodriguez. He's a very good artist I know, whatever. He basically, I wanted to have a page, or I wanted to have a cover that basically summed up the whole story from what the beginning is like. Like, the first short story I did of Guerrilla Galaxy in issue 1 of Pointman is kind of like a pilot episode, but it does, it's like, it will give readers a good jumping on point just to see,
Yeah.
But basically, Guerrilla Galaxy is about Captain Blue Bedlam, a space hero who had to save the universe at the cost of destroying Guerrilla Galaxy.
Okay.
Can you see? Okay, there it is.
Right, yep, I can see it for sure.
And basically, I somewhat did a kind of homage kind of pose, although it's kind of drastically different from its original intent, from an issue of Watchmen, where Ozymandias is clicking the button to release the space creature and kill everybody.
Okay.
Or that genetically modified creature.
Right.
Manhattan. Although it's not similar because he wasn't holding a gun, he wasn't a big blue gorilla pompadour.
Right.
It's drastically different or whatever.
Yep.
Not so I can avoid copyright, sort of.
Oh, for sure. In doing homage, I mean, we've seen a lot of good. There's a lot of iconic covers out there that people, whether it be Spider-Man or Joker, or, I think that's a staple almost of the comic book industry in a way that they sort of show. As I've said before, we as writers or we as creators or indie people, we stand on the shoulders of giants, and there's nothing wrong with kind of acknowledging that and saying, hey, look, somebody came before me and did this great thing, and here I am coming along trying to do close to as good. So I don't think there's any problem at all with doing homage covers or inspiration covers and things like that, because it's showing a respect to what came before us,
right?
In a way, and that's always good.
And you always have to acknowledge that what came before you has to be acknowledged and utilized. Like, people give Watchmen a lot of flack for it ruining comics, but I'm like, no, it was generally bringing in a different style of writing that was never introduced before. Because what Alan Moore essentially did was he brought the spirit of 2000 AD, and this was something that was that was mentioned in a documentary about 2000 AD is that superhero comics back in the day or whatever, they were all very like super fun and no sort of realism was introduced to them. But then of course, and then people are like, of course, going, oh yeah, let's make all comics superhero comics like this. I'm like, no, that's not how that works. He worked towards that and created it. He was also working on a book called Swamp Thing where he introduced body horror at a different level. Because like what he did was he respected the material and introduced his own take on it, where he changed a character who essentially was trying to look for the cure to be human again, but a big plot twist, hopefully I don't spoil this for you, it's Swamp Thing 21, is basically it's revealed that Alec Holland, the swamp creature for the Swamp Thing, was never Alec Holland to begin with. He was a plant creature brought to life that didn't know he was a fake.
Right.
He will essentially never be human again because he was never human to begin with.
Yeah.
And later on, he expanded more about that character, and it's like I got the whole series that I have to reread because, like, essentially, it's like it's really good stuff.
Yeah.
The thing is, now this is recently going on with that. Are you familiar with the manga versus American comics discourse?
Oh yeah, yeah,
yeah. So essentially, and well, before I bring up this point, I want to bring up about how grim and gritty storytelling was sort of already introduced first with Amazing Fantasy 15 with Spider-Man.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, what you essentially got was, oh yeah, he's got superpowers. It's fun, exciting. Then as I'm reading it, it's like it explains how he let a criminal go free, and that criminal essentially killed his Uncle Ben.
Yeah.
And then he realized he screwed up. He realized like his actions had consequences.
Right. It humanized him in a way that a lot of comic book characters at the time were not. They were superheroes and they weren't really human, where Spider-Man was one of the first relatable. And I think that's what's made him so popular, is he was so relatable to real people. Or like, you can't relate to Superman. Like, there's no way anybody in the world can feel like Superman, but you can feel like Peter Parker,
Yeah, like that's what Stan Lee sort of essentially put into the Marvel era, was basically making these characters have superpowers and them not liking these superpowers.
Yeah.
But on the point about, relating to Superman, it's that like Superman is like hopeful and like essentially, an ideal people strive for. Like there is no fault in striving for an ideal. You have bodybuilders that want to like work out. You got people who like want to be a good person.
Right.
You have faults and you fail, but then of course you get right back up. Now, the thing is that it needs to be kind of like addressed in the relatability of these characters, is that you need to be careful. Let me just switch out this one.
Sure.
With the first pages. You got the color files.
Yeah, that'd be great. I know that people love seeing seeing what's coming up.
Oh crap. You're not gonna get monetized. I accidentally had
it's okay.
Bad word.
I'm not monetized. I'm not monetized right now anyway. We need more followers for this. Subscribe, click the red button, and we'll get there.
No, just a second. Let me just see.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so when you essentially create relatability in characters, it doesn't essentially mean you create them to be a reflection of yourself.
Right.
Because then you will sometimes make them to be the mouthpieces to something you're angry about, and this person will agree with you. This person you drew is you, and you made them like essentially like you're holding a puppet, you know. And some people will do this with mainstream characters, and it's like that's sort of like cheap in the sense that you walked in and used somebody else's characters to push out a point where afterwards when you get criticized for it and people get angry at you for it, the thing is you will then just repeat the same thing again. So it's like, what was the point in the first place for you writing this character when you're just going to mouth off these criticisms, you know? Like, what do you want to do? Is like immortalize it, stay the same, stay mad? It's like, do you really want to just keep talking about all this bad stuff all the time, you know?
No, yeah, you're absolutely right. And relatability in a character is more, I mean, there's a lot more to it as far as writing a character that is realistic. And a lot of people confuse relatability with or sympathetic character. They think a sympathetic character is someone that you can it's weird that you can sympathize with. And a sympathetic character doesn't necessarily mean one you can sympathize with. It just means one you can understand their motives. Doesn't mean you agree with their motives or like their motives or think their motives were good or justified. It just means you can understand that a person could do the things they did because of their motives. That's what a sympathetic character is. And a lot of people confuse that and think that, oh, because you are sympathizing with this character, then that means you're like them. And that's not what that means.
Right. Like, essentially some people will go about, I've had some like talks with people about like the Invincible series where some people are like saying, oh, you missed the point in idolizing these characters. And with the Omni-Man character, one of the most, I think, recognizable characters now in the Invincible fandom and outside of it, because now everyone's making memes of that character.
Right, yeah.
You know? And it's like, because it's like now I know that some of the fans of the original comic don't like some of the changes they did, although it's like they had to essentially change it from the month-by-month format or whenever this book came out to fit the TV scheduling. Like, animation takes a lot of time.
Yes. Well, and I think a lot of people don't understand, and especially being I'm a narrative author. I don't write comics. I write novels and short stories. There are things you can do in a story that you write that you can't do in a show, that you can't do in a TV show. And the same goes with comics. There are things you can do in still comics that you cannot do in animation or a movie. So I think people forget that, or they don't know that, and then they get really bent out of shape when a show or a movie doesn't follow exactly. Now, I've seen some that are really bad, that really change a lot of things that didn't need to change, but people have to realize that there are things you can't do when you take a book and translate it into a movie, or you take a comic and translate it into a TV show. There are things you can't do in that format, but there are also things those formats can do that comics and books can't do. So there's going to be changes, and I think people expect a page-by-page translation, and you're just not going to get that.
Now, coming back to the one point I was bringing about with comics versus American comics.
Yeah, the manga. The manga thing. Yep.
Manga. I was about to say Japanese or whatever in my head, but then I said, no.
Essentially the same thing.
Yeah. Because, like, what they do is they do it in a kind of like what comics used to be, in the sense that, you know, first off, I want to say, like, they could learn a thing or two with how manga has been doing, that they have been focusing just on the story. Right. They don't use most of their characters as mouthpieces for, oh, this person said something bad, and then everyone's like, yeah, that person said something bad, and it's the best thing ever. Oh, yeah, you gonna buy the comic? No, who would buy any of this junk. It's like,
Right.
wow, so what was the point in doing that?
Yeah.
Most of the manga is about, like, for example, My Hero Academia. It's about Deku, right? Deku was born without a quirk because of a defect, and then he meets the what essentially is the Superman of their series, or someone even better. Is that, well, I would say he's a mixture of kind of like I would say he kind of is like the Incredible Hulk in a way that All Might looks like this big buff dude, but if you look at it in the manga, he becomes this really shriveled up guy.
Yeah.
Is that his quirk is sort of, well, quirk or superpower, like that's the name for their superpowers. They're called quirks. It's a very easy name to remember, Is that essentially he is getting weaker and weaker, and he's going to lose out his powers. But then he can transfer his power to somebody else, which of course he transfers it to Deku, of course, as he becomes the main character. Essentially, he has to start using his powers more and get better at handling them, whatever. And he's like struggling through them and going through all that. Along with all these other characters that want to be heroes. It's very popular because, again, it's focusing on the story. There are no moments where they're talking about social activism or soapbox writing, is what I like to call it, where if you really wanted to talk about these issues, you would write a book on them or write a magazine. You wouldn't be using popular characters to push your pieces together, which comics have had this it wasn't a recent controversy. It was sort of like a dig at Jordan Peterson by having him as the Red Skull.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
like, and then I look, it's like, what is about Jordan Peterson that actually is controversial is that he just says clean your room, take responsibility for your life. And it's like, okay, I think you're proving his point and stuff like that by hating on the guy who's just saying just take care of yourself, I guess. I laughed about that.
Yeah, it's been an unfortunate. I mean, it's what drove me away from Marvel, and I never was a DC guy, but it definitely drove me away from Marvel when the comics became more about trying to write about current events and the problem with writing that way, whether you're a novelist or a comic book writer, is you date yourself. I mean, we can look back even at books like 1984. Well, 1984 was how long ago? And sure, things look like 1984 now, but when 1984 rolled around, the date and things weren't like the book, that author dated themselves in a way. And while that's still a good book and it's still a book that should be appreciated for what it talks about, you got to be careful when you write about politics or current events, because in 20 years, whatever you write may be completely irrelevant. And that's, you can go back, like we've been talking about very old comic books. You can go back and read some of those comic books from 40 or 50 years ago, and they're still relatable today. But I'm afraid in 30 or 40 years, people are going to read today's comic books and they're not going to understand them. They're not going to be relatable at all. And that's unfortunate because, X-Men was always my thing, and I feel like you could go back and read X-Men from the 60s and 70s and even 80s and really relate that to social interaction and civil liberties and all these really important topics. You could read that comic and it would relate, but now you read the X-Men and you're like, this doesn't make any sense, and it's going to make less sense in 10 years or 15 or 20 years.
Right. And we could go on and on about complaining about this or something like that. But then it's like, why don't you just make your own X-Men?
Exactly.
That's essentially what I've seen with a lot of other people. That's essentially what I'm planning to kind of do with my own superhero series, but in a different way, but not with mutants, sort of with the concept like if you understand from like, for some reason, the majority of the mutants all look handsome and like
Right.
supermodel like or whatever. But I kind of wondered about the idea of what if you keep using your power, you will slowly start turning into a monster in appearance.
Ah,
And
yeah,
then
that's an interesting way to look at it. Yeah.
because it's like with the Incredible Hulk, is like he hulked out whenever he was angry, but it's like what if he just kept becoming more and more
Yeah.
deformed looking, where he couldn't handle being out in public?
Yeah.
Like people would just look at him funny. And like this one aspect of the X-Men that I think, like I'm trying to remember what was the tagline, that they live in a world
Oh yeah.
feared and hated.
Yeah. I wish I could remember it. That kills me because I'm such an X-Men fan. Yeah. Oh wow, I can't remember it. Oh,
Yeah, it
that
was hated
kills
and
me.
feared. But
Right.
I was thinking, what if you got people that live in a world with superheroes that essentially are justified in being feared by these people because they are very dangerous
Right.
individuals, because they have powers that can lift
Yeah.
the sun out of the sky, or boil the ocean away, just with a
Right.
mere thought.
Yeah.
That
No,
would scare a
that's
lot of people.
sure. Yeah, I think that's a cool concept. Speaking
Yeah.
of old comics, what got you hooked? Can you remember like the first comic series or comic book that really like flipped that switch and made you a fan?
I would have to say it was Alan Moore's writing when I finally got a hold of his Swamp Thing. Like when I first read the anatomy lesson, that was
Okay.
like um, just showing just how you got this build up and you got introduced to this world, and it was like, wow, you just that twist towards the end where like Alec Holland just standing over those like files, and like he's trying to have this old man looking up at this giant creature that he was about to turn into like a weapon, but it's like he essentially is trying to have a conversation with them, and
Yeah.
failing, and like he says the wrong thing where it's like, just like, have you read the files? And it's like, yeah, and it's like, do you like it? And I mean, I think he was essentially asking him, do you like being this immortal creature monster thing? And like,
Yeah.
it just makes Swamp Thing just flips out and just starts charging at him, and there's no way for this old man to escape. He's fated to die in that building, which of
Yeah.
course, like, Swamp Thing just hugs him to death, and essentially that starts off the rest of the series.
Yeah. Yeah. That was some good work. Alan Moore's work and some of the others in that era were really good. For me, it was always I think my buddy let me borrow the Dark Phoenix saga and the Death of the X-Men run back in the, let's say, late 80s, and that's what got me for sure. Um, so what? So you went indie base. I mean, you went indie just because. I guess I'll let you say why, rather than submit your books to say Image or your ideas to Alterna Comics or whatever. What made you decide to go out on your own and do this?
Essentially, it's like you get rejection letter after rejection letter, and then of
Yeah.
course it's like you can just do it yourself
Mm-hmm.
and put out your own work, like good comics, good like you know, like just do it yourself. Like, do
Mm-hmm.
you really need all this like? Oh, I'm gonna be in indie comics, or I'm gonna be in mainstream comics. I'm gonna be writing Spider-Man. It's like, but essentially, it's like it's a hard kind of like business to really get into because you
It
need
is.
basically a lot of connections. You also need to
Mm-hmm.
be fake. You need to be fake in how you deal with things. Because if you've ever interacted with a lot of pros online, majority of them don't essentially have this. Some of them don't seem to have the love for comics that they used to have. Some of them have
Yeah.
this jaded worldview, such as
Yeah.
you got a bunch of people. They made a billboard of bring Tony Stark back, and one of these comic pros just flat out disregarded how all these passionate fans
Mm-hmm.
were about Tony Stark, about Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark, is that his response was, or you guys could read the comics, and it's like, you honestly need to understand that what you're saying is you're spitting in the faces of all these customers that spent their hard-earned money on these movies. They spent their money. They worked hours and hours and hours, and it's like a lot of them just don't seem to care.
Yeah.
And this guy doesn't even, like, I don't think he's ever. Last time I saw a comic he did, he wrote an Ant-Man issue or whatever.
Yeah.
And he just seemed really jaded and smug about it. And it was like, you can't just overlook that fans like this character. They like how this character was. And then it's like, well, they just don't like Ironheart or whatever. And it's like, who cares about this character? Because majority of the time, this character hasn't been built up, to be popular.
Right. Yeah.
Like, they want these characters to be popular, but it's like, if you want to look at a character that overnight became really popular, you look at the Yara Flor, the Brazilian Wonder Woman. That got popular for some reason.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, everyone knows this character now, whatever. And they're like, oh, it's replacing Wonder Woman. It's like, well, whatever, there's other Wonder Woman. But it's like, apparently they really like this character, and they will get angry if you make certain jokes about this character. And it's like, wow, okay.
Some characters that happen. When I'm going to date myself here, but I grew up, like, I literally saw Return of the Jedi in the theater, and I saw Empire Strike Back on HBO when it came out of the theater, and I was always surprised about how popular Boba Fett was. Boba Fett has no lines. He has one line in Empire Strikes Back. He's barely in the movie. And between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, he becomes one of the most popular characters in Star Wars. And it's hard to judge that. Like when, this Yara comes out and becomes super popular, you have no idea why sometimes. Something just clicks with readers or viewers or fans or whatever it might be. And sometimes you're sitting there going, why? Like if you... Now, of course, Boba Fett's huge in Star Wars lore, but if you go back to when he first came out and first became popular, he's virtually non-existent. He's a side character with one line, and he becomes one of the biggest Star Wars characters next to freaking Vader and Luke Skywalker. Makes no sense, but sometimes that's how it works. So fans are weird like that, we pick up on things and we're like, okay, that's suddenly my favorite thing, and you just like, it doesn't make any sense sometimes. I don't know. And you're right though. Like I run into that myself. Creators, there's a huge difference. Like I used to read Marvel Comics when Stan Lee would actually answer letters in the back of the issues. And there's a huge difference between the way Marvel felt back in the day, back in the 80s and 90s versus the way it feels today. And a lot of it has to do with the attitude and the response that you get from creators and writers and artists. And that's unfortunate because it drives fans. It drives long-term fans away. I bought Marvel Comics for almost 30 years, and I haven't bought one since 2012. So it sucks. That was a hard cut for me, but it had to happen, Being indie, what do you think? What would you say is the best thing? What makes being indie worth it for you?
I would have to say is the power behind not I would say the power of freedom of expression.
Yeah.
In my own work is that I don't have to. I'm my own boss. I can basically make my own decisions on that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to kowtow to a lot of like superiors and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because like most of these people that I talk to who are other indie creators, they're like kind of like colleagues to me in a way that I'm able to talk to them and showcase their other work.
Yeah. That is huge. Yeah, the power in your own decision making is that's a pretty big thing. It really is. What advice would you give to somebody if somebody were going to do, like somebody comes to you and says, I want to make my own comic books? What's the best piece of advice you can give them if they're going to go it on their own?
First off, probably don't kill off the main character in your story.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, just don't do it like, maybe set up a character to seem like he's the first main character or something like that, maybe as a surprise, but you don't kill off the main character of your story.
Yeah.
Second, when making up a name for your characters, just pick anything. Just really pick anything, and don't be embarrassed later that, it doesn't fit with the story. But it's like, I just have to basically just put this out there that the majority of the names that are ever come up with any of these characters in this lore or whatever are by far never going to be unique or stupid or something like that, because it's like, later on, it's like it's not going to, like, it's a popular lore or popular series that catches people in. Sometimes the names are very recognizable. Like, you say Kratos, and PlayStation fans or whatever will recognize that character. You say, I'm trying to think. If you say Peter Parker, Marvel fans will know this character.
Right.
You say Bruce Wayne, people will know this character. Because it's like, it's Batman, but it's like, he could have been named something else or whatever. I know there's some, like, attachment to his name or whatever. Then there's Scott Summers, who's from Marvel too. Then there's Ben Grimm.
Well,
then there's...
Quite honestly, I mean, some of the characters that are the most popular characters in comics have some pretty dumb names. I mean, Superman... How on the nose is that name? Or Batman. I mean, those are iconic characters that everybody in the world knows. Everybody knows who Superman is, but really when you sit down and think about it, that is the lamest damn name you could have given a superhero. Superman. Yeah. He's a Superman.
and they sold that idea for about, I think, $14 or less than that, and it made DC Comics millions.
Yeah.
When Joe Shuster and Jerry Siegel sold the character off. There's a sort of like, the big problem is that the majority of these characters that we now know or whatever, all these big name characters, they used to be, usually people had to work like they had to work like a long amount of their days trying to get 6 pages a day taken care of, written, lettered, and then colored.
Yeah.
And, like, basically it's like, they just had to keep the roofs over their heads. And basically then it's like, it used to be crap, but then it's, of course, it became the shit, you know, for a lot of people when it boomed.
Yep.
Like, if you also just look at, Image Comics or whatever, the majority of the Image Comics characters, I can't name all of them. I can only name like Spawn, who's Al Simmons. I'm pretty sure his name's Al Simmons.
I think that's his. I was never a Spawn reader. I saw the movie and I've read a couple of the books, but I think you're right. I think that's his name.
And like a lot of it is like majority of the time they try to do that shared universe bit, but it's like, nah, that ain't happening. Most of these creator-owned people, they only stick with their stuff. They wanted to... basically, it's like they just want to be their own creators, and it's only under the name. Nobody owns any of these creations.
Yeah. That's a big challenge. I'm working on a couple of collaborative projects myself, and it's a tricky thing to navigate, especially when it comes to writing, because... our copyright rules are a whole different ball game than artists. Fan art sells all the time at conventions, but nobody's making fan writing that's legal, because it's not. So that becomes tricky when you want to cross over characters, because you're essentially allowing another writer to write that character, and that's a minefield that's tough to navigate for sure.
Right. A bit of advice for some people when they're just starting out with their media is that they have to network with a lot of people to help get their stuff out there for a lot of people to see.
Yeah.
Because like essentially, it's like if you only stick with one group of friends, it's just gonna be passed around in the same net over and over and over again.
Yeah.
You've got to find interesting ways to showcase a lot of your ideas.
Yeah.
Now, this art looks really great or whatever, but it's like I'm pretty sure nobody can name this character right now.
Right. Well, yeah,
Yeah.
unless they've read your book. It's just not. It's,
Yeah. Like,
you've got some time. You got to get it out there and get it recognizable to the public. Speaking of that, and speaking of networking, what do you have, or are you planning to do shows, conventions, even small things coming up? Is there anything you're doing out there with physical copies?
not essentially right now because it's like a lot of things are shut down and a lot of like, you know, mostly just only digital, trying to build up my online presence with a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Messing around with memes and messing around with other people I know who have larger followings, which have helped with showcasing my stuff around.
That's good. Yeah, I think that's the toughest part about what we do is trying to get people to see our stuff.
I am like possibly thinking in the future to do like 1-minute comic reviews to basically push around because people's like attention span. There's probably a few people that probably checked out this stream and probably like clocked out because maybe I sounded boring or whatever. Although maybe if I kept up on interesting topics like The Boys or like Invincible series, you know, like that, like also talked a little bit more about the manga versus like American stuff, along with the like what happened with the Berserk author. Like, bam, a lot of people love that series.
Yeah, that was a big blow. Yeah,
he's like, yeah, but like there's been a lot of talk, but it's like essentially it's like you just gotta work towards how other authors kept at it and kept putting their product out, which me, it's like I gotta essentially keep moving my product out a little bit faster instead of taking. It's like you just gotta explain to the artist he doesn't need to add in too much background. That's the thing is with, if you've noticed with a lot of, have you ever read manga?
Yeah, here and there, and I know where you go, and a lot of the backgrounds in the panels are like sometimes just completely non-existent.
Right, and that helps on the saving time for all the people working on it. Of course, I think they have like 3 or 4 different people working on the same thing. They don't have one person do it.
Right, a lot of times, yeah. Usually there's a team. Yep.
Which, of course, this was done by... this book had only one artist on it and one colorist. I'm the writer and creator of Gorilla Galaxy. This is Blue Bedlam. And essentially, you know, this is basically just skipping. This is the first 5 pages. This is a double-page spread. I've never done one of these before. I print out my comics, but hopefully it'll look great once it's finally printed.
I think so, yeah.
So essentially, it's like here is him waking up. I don't have this all re-lettered again.
Right.
So essentially, like, what's interesting to do is you need to figure out that majority of this, like, I added I wanted background for this, but it's like essentially all these lines or whatever, you know, I probably should have mentioned something to them, not to include too many of them.
Well, I'd have to say it does add some depth to the book, and I get your point about manga. While it's lower detail and does save time, if he's meeting your deadlines, I guess that's, you know, as long as he's meeting the deadline, you want that depth, you want that sort of environmental feel, I think, to the book, which adds more to it, because comics are a visual thing. And while I do read manga, and I've read a few, and whether it be, you know, some popular stuff or some old school stuff, it's easy to gloss over some of those panels because there's not a whole lot going on. Then you start to wonder, could it have just been a short story? When you're not giving that much art, it could have just been a narrative story without all the panels and talk bubbles. You know what I mean? So,
right.
I guess there's give and take between both of them. But as long as he's meeting your deadlines, which is good, because that is important. You're working with a team. You've got to get the deadlines. It's different than someone like me who's doing it all myself. So the only person I'm yelling at to work faster is me. Do you have? I guess you got issue 3 coming out soon or in the near future, right?
Yeah, I just gotta get a few more pages done. But if they don't get done too soon, I'll probably have to just say, screw it. I'm just gonna add in some back page material for people to look over.
Is it going to be? Are you running that on a sort of? Are you doing any of these on a Kickstarter, Indiegogo, or are you just putting them right there up on the Indie Comic site?
On Indie Planet. That's
right. What Indie Planet, yeah.
Yeah, that I don't do crowd funds because I don't know how to do them. Plus, it's I already have the money I can spend to get this comic put out.
Okay.
And it's a lot of people keep saying, "Oh, I should do one," but I'm like, I don't feel I should do it because it's I've already gotten this,
Yeah, if you don't need to, I'm with you. I don't crowdfund my books when I put one out. I have the money to produce what I need to produce, and then hopefully the last book helps pay for the next one. So do you pay your artists? How do you do because I've heard different things especially with the indie crowd. Do you pay your artist up front per panel? Do they share in the profits? How do you work that out with them?
Well, I pay them for the pages, then I sell it, then I reap in the profits from that.
Okay.
Essentially they've already gotten paid,
Okay.
I've already gotten this out, and it's hard to kind of put out sales because it's oh yeah, nobody's looking at these before.
Right, yeah. No, I can understand that, yeah, the drawback.
I can't really share a lot of profits because it's a lot's not coming in, sort of, but it's
right.
But they have a whole bunch of portfolio they can show people, artwork that they've done.
Sure, yeah. No,
now
totally
it's what gets people's attention is the aspect of sex sells, whatever, or
right.
Because this right here, vacuum sealed clothing, that really gets on a lot of people's nerve.
It does.
Yeah, but then I'm I just let the artist do it, It's
right.
Whatever. It's that's essentially how it works, it's fiction, it's fantasy.
Right.
These characters wouldn't be able to breathe in space properly,
right.
in Total Recall, the movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
It shows them jettisoned out on the surface of Mars, and they are gasping for breath, and their eyeballs are popping out, and they're essentially about to explode.
Right.
And then the air comes on, or the atmosphere comes on through the magical technological thing or whatever. And now, why is it that they got normal just after that, where they're on the point of almost exploding, didn't have brain damage or something along those lines?
That's fiction.
Yeah, and it's these same people are angry at when somebody's drawing characters like this.
Yeah.
But of course, it's only when it's a popular
sure.
fan or something like that, or a popular artist. They'll essentially never go after somewhat indie guys because they're not reading these books,
Yeah, for sure.
They're only seeing the artwork, and then they do the fix-it art, which is a very controversial take because you had this recent thing with J. Scott Campbell where he did a fix-it art of his own.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know, he apologized for it, whatever. Because, when you're in the mainstream, you have to kind of, go about kind of covering your ass. Because it's you'll lose connections.
Don't be a dick, basically. Yeah.
But, of course, it's it's not he... Essentially, they did it first, I see a whole bunch of, threads of people, redoing just women in comics, always just women.
Right.
Like, that's the huge trend. That they always like, oh yeah, we're gonna unvacuum seal these characters. We're going to draw them in a better position. And it's like, who cares? Like, it's boring. That's the reason why it's not eye catching, because you made boring art. If you wanted to create boring art, you would probably just be someone who makes art for furniture and stuff like that.
Yep.
Where people are sitting on it.
Yep. Yeah, I totally agree. I'm loving the new look of the panels. And interesting. I read through the first issue after I picked it up. I like the mix of characters. I like the weasel, like the ferret characters versus the sort of snake people theme that's going on in that first issue with Gorilla Glass. That was kind of cool when I figured out what. Like, it took me a second to realize what was going on, and then I thought back to the whole animal, weasels fighting snakes thing, and I'm like, okay, that makes total sense. That was a really cool play on that.
Right, yeah. Like, you have to add some of those story elements that are relatable and understandable, like the theme for Beauty and the Beast or whatever,
Yeah.
That's a universal thing. People always remember that, a woman saving a man,
right.
in that sense. Although, of course, nowadays that would be considered weak for a woman to help save a man through love, and it's like, if you think about it, it's like a lot of these people have this idea that they have to take art that's been done years ago and hold it up to a modern social
that's unfortunate
chart. They can do that all they want. That's their right. But the thing is, it's like, some artists are kind of gullible in the aspect that, oh, we have to do it this way. It's like, or I can't do this or I'll get canceled. And it's like, just like what recently happened again, something I gotta keep up on and remember is that, we have Chris Rock or Childish Gambino.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
So. Yeah. Saying that we have boring entertainment now. Because a lot of it is not risky, we don't want to offend everybody. We don't want to offend this.
Right.
For people who don't watch the show. That's the weird thing about American media now, is that, we don't want to offend anybody. That's one of the big draws to, like, manga or anime entertainment is that they live in another country. They do not care about this stuff because they are free to do that. Yep. Going in and saying you should change your stuff now is socially, like, social colonialism. Like, you want to basically stake your flag into this country and change how they want to live their lives. And it's like, I'm sorry, that's probably never going to happen. You are wasting your time getting angry at cartoon characters.
Yep.
Or angry at a media that is entirely different from your own.
Right.
That's never going to happen.
Yeah, you're right.
You need to have that attitude towards making your own stuff, because it's like, essentially, these people are not buying your books. These people are not going to, because they're not interested in it. They don't. I think they just don't have an aspect of fun in their lives.
Yeah, there's a lot of question to that. Is how they get through the day when they're always looking for something to get offended by.
Yeah.
But yeah, cool look. Thank you for showing the new pages. I'm liking the new artist is doing a really good job. Like the original short that I read was really cool. This guy's art, while different, is good as well, just as good. There's a lot more, I guess. There's a lot more. I don't know what the word I'm looking for. The faces, the expressions of the characters are a lot more emotive, a lot more vibrant. I like the way this looks. The Weasel character, I'm guessing the woman behind him is the princess from the first story. Is that her?
Oh no, that's this is a different character. I'm going to essentially use that princess for a different story.
Okay. All right, cool. I was just wondering because I noticed the green and I thought maybe it was.
She is a snake person.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
so,
just a little bit different.
Really interesting. I like the way it's going. I like that. So other than the indie comic page, where else can people find your work? I'll post a link to your Twitter. Where else can we find you?
You can find it on Kindle. Let me just get the link for it.
Yeah, drop that in there and I'll make sure to get it.
Yeah, but it's like Kindle only offers the digital version.
Right, yep.
And it's got like 5-star ratings, which is pretty good.
Awesome. Yeah, that is good.
But I need to basically stress that it's on Indie Planet, which let me put down the link for it.
Right.
That it's on Indie Planet, which you can get the print-on-demand version.
Yep.
For issues 1 and 2. And that's essentially what a lot of people were always asking me for is, where can I get the print version? Where can I get the print version? And those people are like, oh yeah, I don't know where I get the print version. I didn't even know you had a print version of your book. And it's like, you could have, clicked the link that I've been putting on. It's like you literally have to put an explanation tweet on it or something like that.
Well, unfortunately, and doing a lot of the research as an author myself, when you tweet something out, it's only a very small percentage of your followers who actually see that tweet, and the percentage is less than 10. It's somewhere around 3 to 6% of your followers actually see your tweet. So it becomes this thing where you almost have to spam it, but then when you spam it, people get annoyed and they unfollow you. So you have to find this balance of marketing at different times and different ways of getting it out there so more people see it. It's sucks. It really does suck.
Well, that's essentially the thing, that it gets a little bit where even if I do get 5 or 10 people to see it, they essentially don't even click the link and look at it, where it's like I literally have to make an account that basically says buy on Indie Planet. So people are like, okay, here's a link that says Indie Planet. So it's like, okay, what does that mean? It means, buy on Indie Planet. Like,
hopefully we'll be able to get more people to see it, and we'll push it out there as we get more subscribers to come in. Subscribe to the channel, obviously. Check out Pointman C or Pointman Comics on Twitter. I'll put a link in the video description below. Check out the Kindle and the Indie Planet links. I'll put those in there as well.
Yeah, but I also put up the other one, which is purely my promotional account, which people can look up.
Okay.
To share out, which is Pointman B or buy on Indie Planet.
Gotcha. I'll make sure that's linked as well.
But mostly the first account I have, I've been able to have a lot of people follow me and stuff like that. About 2,000 followers, but mostly it's through thanks to some of the other people I know that I have. But mostly it's been good.
Good. Yeah, that's really the key, is networking. Talking to more people, getting more people interested, and hopefully getting the word out there and getting more people into it. All right, good deal. Hey, it's been great. What are we at? Are we at an hour? I think we've been talking for an hour, which is good. So yeah, I'm going to leave everybody with that. Check out the links in the video description below. I will make sure everything's linked after this live stream is over, so when you're checking out the recording, you'll have all the links to find Pointman Comics, all the issues that are out there. Find his Twitter, his Kindle, and everything. I'll get it out there for you. And it was great talking to you, man.
It was great talking to you too, Trevor.
Awesome. Best of luck, and we will see you guys again soon. Everybody have a great one. Much love. Bye.